I've done what I think is astral projection several times, and from what I've noticed, there's nothing else that taps into it every time that I do. I'm pretty sure it's a demon I contacted several times through the Ouija board. This demon's name starts with Z, and the last time I astral projected, it was completely on accident, but now I am terrified of any communication to that realm. I've stopped using Ouija boards for a while because of a lot of different things. Long story short, I know I'm touched, and I know this thing follows me. Maybe it wants my soul. I don't really know. But anyways, ADD kicking in. So my storytelling is kind of off, but I remember waking up the first time in my dream. At first, I didn't know this was a dream. But then I got out of bed and instantly fell and busted my head open on a 25-pound weight I leave on my floor. Obviously, it wasn't real, or I wouldn't be here. But right after that, I woke up in my bed again, almost like a repeat, but this time, it was a little different. I got up and started to glide around my home. I went into the ceiling and saw a black space. Then I'd glide back down. It started to worry me, and I was actually aware this wasn't real. So I went back to my mom's room and tried to wake her up. She couldn't hear me. She just laid there, no matter how loud I yelled. After about a moment of frustration, I wake up in my bed. Again, another repeat. But now I'm starting to notice like a belly growl laugh. When I wake up over and over, I already know what it is, and it freaked me out so desperately I tried to wake myself up. Unfortunately, it wasn't that easy, though. I pretty much died in my dream, like 3 or 4 times. And when I did wake up, I told my mom. I thought I'd seen hell and it scared the shit out of me. It could have been the drug that influenced me, but personally, I think it just amplifies my ability to contact spirits or demons. I've had similar types of dreams, actually, even worse, that I don't want to speak on. But I'd like to know if anyone has an experience like this, or relating to the Ouija board, or the demon. Obviously, it's not its full name. You already know what it is. Or astral projection. Another thing I'd like to mention is all this happens in about 1.5 hours of sleep, and it felt like it was days, in the same loop. I actually thought I was dead for a while. Alright, this is a short story. I wasn't feeling good one day, and I wanted to take a quick nap. I was laying in my bed facing my wall. I was almost asleep. Me personally, when I'm almost asleep, and don't really hear people walk in my room or say my name, I have to be touched to realize you're there. Anyway, I was almost asleep when I felt this hard shove on my back. I thought my brother came into my room, and I didn't notice, but I rolled over, and I was alone. There was no one in my room. It freaked me out because I felt a hand on my back. Anyway, I'm so used to these things happening, I rolled back over and went back to sleep. I recently moved into my new apartment with my best friends. Our first night in our new apartment, my friend was sitting on our couch that faces a long hallway. We were watching TV, and I noticed his face turn white. He looked petrified. I asked him what's wrong, and he asked if anyone else is in the house with us. I tell him no, it's just us. And he said he saw a woman walk into our bathroom and come down the stairs. This obviously freaked me out, and we decided it could have happened from all the weird energy surrounding campus move-in day. As the weeks have gone on, more and more people have been spotting this woman, shadow figure, in our apartment complex. I had a first-hand encounter the other day. I was getting ready to shower, and the bathroom door creaked open. I heard someone walk past the door, so I looked out to see who it was, and I see the shadow woman walk into our kitchen. I've never seen an apparition so clear before. It was truly amazing and frightening all at the same time. One of my roommates, we'll call him D, has had the most encounters with this shadow woman. He has seen her 3 times since being at school, and it's really scaring him, to the point he wants to move out. Beyond my apartment, a few neighbors have talked about seeing this shadow woman walking around. I've never seen or heard so many people openly talking about the paranormal, but there is something going on here. My roommates and I have a GoPro, and we are going to try to get some footage of this shadow person. This sent chills down my spine. So this is my mom's story that she told me. So, I used to have an aunt that unfortunately died before I was born. This experience happened to my cousin, who was around 6 years old at the time of this happening. Story. So this story happens on my aunt's 3rd or 4th death anniversary. My mom comes to visit my cousin's house after she goes to my aunt's burial site. My cousin is very little at the time. I am not yet born. Then, out of the blue, my cousin rushes up to my mom and tells her that my aunt is standing in front of the window. My mom goes to check, and nothing is there. I recently asked my cousin of this, and she has no idea what I'm talking about. Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake for 15 days using an experimental gas-based stimulant. They were kept in a sealed environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intake so that the gas wouldn't kill them, since it was toxic in high concentrations. This was before closed-circuit cameras, so they only had microphones and 5-inch thick glass, porthole-sized windows into the chamber to monitor them. The chamber was stocked with books, cots to sleep, but no bedding, running water and toilets, and enough dried food to last for all 5 for over a month. The test subjects were political prisoners deemed enemies of the state during World War II. Everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained and have been promised, falsely, that they would be freed if they submitted to the test and did not sleep for 30 days. Their conversations and activities were monitored, and it was so noted that they continued to talk about increasingly traumatic incidents in their pasts, and the general tone of their conversations took a darker aspect after day 4. After day 5, they started complaining about the circumstances and events that led them to where they were, and started to demonstrate severe paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began alternatively whispering to the microphones and one-way mirrored portholes. Oddly, they all seemed to think they could win the trust of the experimenters by turning over their comrades, the other subjects in captivity with them. At first, the researchers suspected that this was all an effect of the gas itself. After 9 days, the first of them started screaming. He ran the length of the chamber, repeatedly yelling at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight. He continued attempting to scream, but was only able to produce an occasional squeak. The researchers postulated that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising thing about this behavior is how the other captives reacted to it, or rather, didn't react to it. They continued whispering into the microphones until the second of the captives started screaming. The 2 non-screaming captives took the books apart, smeared page after page with their own feces, and pasted them calmly over the glass portholes. Then, the screaming promptly stopped. So did the whispering to the microphones. After 3 more days had passed, the researchers checked the microphones hourly to make sure they were working, since they thought it was impossible that no sound could be coming through with 5 people inside. The oxygen consumption in the chamber indicated that all 5 were still alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen 5 people would consume at a very heavy level of strenuous exercise. On the morning of the 14th day, the researchers did something that they said they would not do to get a reaction from the captives. They used the intercom inside the chamber, hoping to provoke any response from the captives they were afraid were either dead or vegetables. They announced, "We're opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor, or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you or your comrades immediate freedom." To their surprise, they heard a single phrase in a calm response: "We no longer want to be freed." Debate broke out among the researchers and the military forces funding the research. Unable to provoke any more response using intercom, it was finally decided to open the chamber at midnight on the 15th day. The chamber was flushed of the stimulant gas and filled with fresh air, and immediately voices from the microphones began to object. 3 different voices began begging, as if pleading for the life of a loved one to turn the gas back on. The chamber was opened, and the soldiers sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream even louder, and so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive, although no one could rightly call them, in that state, alive. The food rations past 5 days had not been much touched. There were chunks of meat from the dead test subject's thighs and chest, stuffed into the drains in the center of the chamber, blocking the drain and allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. Precisely how much of the water on the floor was actually blood was never determined. All 4 surviving test subjects also had large portions of muscle and skin torn away from their bodies. The destruction of flesh and exposed bone on their fingertips indicated that the wounds were inflicted by hand, not by teeth, as the researchers had initially thought. Closer examination of the position and the angles of the wounds indicated that most of, if not all, were self-inflicted. The abdominal organs below the rib cage of all 4 test subjects had been removed, while the heart, lungs, and diaphragm remained in place. The skin and most of the muscles attached to the ribs had been ripped off, exposing the lungs through the rib cage. All the blood vessels and organs remained intact. They had just been taken out and laid on the floor, fanning out around the still living bodies of the subjects. The digestive tracts of all 4 could be seen to be working, digesting food. It quickly became apparent that what they were digesting was their own flesh that they had ripped off and eaten over the course of days. Most of the soldiers were Russian special operatives at the facility, but still many refused to return to the chamber to remove the test subjects. They continued to scream to be left in the chamber and alternatively begged and demanded that the gas be turned back on, lest they fall asleep. To everyone's surprise, the test subjects put up a fierce fight in the process of being removed from the chamber. One of the Russian soldiers died from having his throat ripped out. Another was gravely injured by having his testicles ripped off and an artery in his leg severed by one of the subject's teeth. Another 5 of the soldiers lost their lives, if you count ones that committed suicide in the weeks following the incident. In the struggle, one of the 4 living subjects had his spleen ruptured, and he bled out almost immediately. The medical researchers attempted to sedate him, but this proved impossible. He was injected with more than 10 times the human dose of morphine, and still fought like a cornered animal, breaking the ribs and arms of one doctor. When heart was seen to beat for a full 2 minutes after he had bled out, to the point there was more air in his vascular system than blood. Even after it stopped, he continued to scream and flail for another 3 minutes, struggling to attack anyone within his reach, repeating one word, more, over and over, weaker and weaker, until he fell silent. The surviving 3 test subjects were heavily restrained and moved to a medical facility. The 2 with intact vocal cords continuously begged for the gas, demanding to be kept awake. The most injured of the 3 was taken to the only surgical operating room the facility had. In the process of preparing the subject to have his organs placed back within his body, it was found that he was effectively immune to the sedative they had given him to prepare him for surgery. He fought furiously against his restraints, but the anesthetic gas was only brought out to put him under. He managed to tear most of the way through a 4-inch wide leather strap on one wrist, even though the weight of a 200-pound soldier holding that wrist as well. It took only a little more anesthetic than normal to put him under, and the instant his eyelids fluttered and closed, his heart stopped. In the autopsy, the test subject that had died on the operating table, it was found that his blood had triple the normal level of oxygen. His muscles that were still attached to his skeleton were badly worn, and he had broken 3 bones in his struggle to not be subdued. The second survivor had been the first of the group of 5 to start screaming. His vocal cords destroyed, he was unable to beg or object to surgery. He only reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval when the anesthetic gas was brought near him. He shook his head yes when someone suggested reluctantly that they try the surgery without anesthetic, and did not react for an entire 6-hour procedure of replacing his abdominal organs and attempting to cover them with what remained of his skin. The The surgeon presiding stated repeatedly that it should be medically impossible for the patient to still be alive. One terrified nurse assisting the surgery stated that she had seen the patient's mouth curl into a smile several times whenever his eyes met hers. When the surgery ended, the subject looked at the surgeon and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to talk while struggling. Assuming this must be something of a drastic importance, the surgeon had a pen and pad fetched so the patient could write his message. It was simple: keep cutting. The other 2 test subjects were given the same surgery, both without anesthetic as well, although they had to be injected with a paralytic for the duration of the operation. The surgeon found it impossible to perform the operation while the patients laughed continuously. Once paralyzed, the subjects could only follow the attending researchers with their eyes. The paralytic cleaned their system in an abnormally short time. They were soon trying to escape their bonds. The moment they could speak, they were asking again for the stimulant gas. The researchers tried asking why they were injuring themselves, why they had ripped out their own guts, and why they wanted to be given the gas again. Only one response was given: I must remain awake. All 3 subjects' restraints were reinforced, and they were placed back into the chamber, awaiting determination as to what was to be done with them. The researchers, facing the wrath of the military benefactors for having failed the stated goals of their project, considered euthanizing the surviving subjects. The commanding officer and an ex-KGB instead saw potential. They wanted to see what would happen if they put the gas back on. The researchers strongly objected, but were overruled. In preparation for being sealed in the chamber again, the subjects were connected to an EEG monitor and had their restraints padded for long-term confinement. To everyone's surprise, all 3 stopped struggling the moment it was let slip they were going to turn the gas back on. It was obvious at this point all 3 were putting up a great struggle to stay awake. One of the subjects that could speak was humming loudly and continuously. The mute subject was straining his legs against the leather bonds with all of his might, left first, and then right, and then left again, for something to focus on. The remaining subject was holding his head off his pillow and blinking rapidly. Having been the first to be wired for an EEG, most of the researchers were monitoring his brainwaves in surprise. They were normal most of the time, but sometimes flatlined inexplicably. It looked as if he were repeatedly suffering brain death before returning to normal. As they focused on paper rolling out of the brainwave monitor, only one nurse saw his eyes slip shut at the same moment his head hit the pillow. His brainwaves immediately changed to that of deep sleep, then flatlined for the first time as his heart simultaneously stopped. The only remaining subject that could speak started screaming to be sealed in now. His brainwaves showed the same flat lines as the one who had just died from falling asleep. The commander gave the order to seal the chamber, with both the subjects inside, as well as 3 researchers. One of the named 3 immediately drew his gun and shot the commander point blank between the eyes, then turned the gun on the mute subject and blew his brains out as well. He pointed his gun at the remaining subject, still restrained to the bed, as the remaining members of the medical and research team fled the room. I won't be locked in here with these things. Not with you, he screamed at the man strapped on the table. What are you? He demanded. I must know. The subject smiled. Have you forgotten so easily? The subject asked. We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at any moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread. The researcher paused, then aimed at the subject's heart and fired. The EEG flatlined as the subject weakly choked out. So nearly free.